Hey, hey, hey. It's your girl, Sylvia K. Austin, here for Next Nation, the podcast. And I am so happy to be with you today. I'm going to jump right into it because we are ending the month of June, which is Men's Health Month, in case you didn't know, with a few good men. Having a great conversation this episode with some brothers who are doing the work, the individual and collective work inside of their brotherhood to address mental health stigmas, mental health challenges, and to address these issues for optimal health for men at large. It's a great conversation. Spent an hour talking to some amazing brothers about just some of the things that they're experiencing in life, their personal traumas, childhood traumas, personal failures, their personal relationships with their fathers or their mothers, things that may have caused a breakdown in their overall stability and their overall health, and how that showed up throughout their life. Um, when we started, or we conceptualized having this conversation, I really wasn't sure the direction in which this conversation would take us, or the direction in which it would go. But I am just so pleased at how all of this shaped up and how this came together. This came together actually because of a dear friend of mine, college friend, who's a mental health advocate who works in the space of mental health advocacy and prioritizing himself and to be a better him. His name is Jay Brown. We attended Morgan State University together. He's a dear friend, and he's been very vocal and very honest about some of the challenges that he's experienced with, just remaining, being able to remain prudent about his mental health. And he introduced me to some amazing brothers who were friends of his in a collective of brotherhood, that allows them to kind of bring forth discussion about how they maintain and sustain their mental health in everyday life. I think it's definitely within the last 18 months, in the middle of a pandemic, we all can attest to that. We've had moments of maybe breakdown and moments of maybe breakthrough. But I think it's necessary in this day and age to start talking about how we prioritize our health, and definitely our mental health. And so for today's show, we will be talking to Mark Harrison, Chris Hubbard, and Aaron Green. These brothers all have very unique stories and backgrounds. Chris Hubbard plays in the NFL. Aaron is a social worker, so he has the opportunity to do this work and talk through some of these issues in his day-to-day. And Mark is Mark. Mark is a ham, and we had a really, really great time in our discussion about just some of the challenges that they experience. And Mark's also a mental health advocate who's been very vocal and on the forefront of mental health advocacy for men. So up next, my conversation with the brothers about the importance of mental health, especially as we round out and end the month of June for Men's Health Month. What a great discussion. And we invited in friend to the show, contributor to the show, but also social worker, counselor, and therapist Paul Bache Williams to kind of give his perspective and his way in on how we address these challenges and how we work through them. So with that, enjoy the show. And please send us your feedback, share the show, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, post it to social media. You can find this show on all social platforms where podcasts are heard. We're on Apple, we're on Google, we're on Spotify. We're on Spreaker Radio. We are on iHeart, and we are trying to be good stewards over our health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, doing all of the work that we need to do to make sure that we are empowering our wellness. Empowering our wellness. So join us for this episode. Thanks so much. I'm your host, Sylvia Alston. We love you. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening. Hey, brothers.
Hey, what is going on?
Glad to see y'all in the land of the living on this beautiful day. Really good to see you guys. I'm really glad we could get together for this conversation. I think it's much needed at the end of men's history. Is it Men's History Month or is it just Men's Month? I think it's just
Men's Health Month.
Men's Health. It's Men's Health Month. Okay. Let's do it. Let's do it right. At the end of Men's Health Month, it's wonderful to have this opportunity to get together with you gentlemen. I want to just kind of do some housekeeping and go back to how this conversation originated. Jay Brown, who's a very good friend of mine, and one of my friends from college, who we've kept up with one another since we left school. I feel as if I can be counted amongst your community of support. You've been very candid and open with me about your challenges and your struggles um, in life in general, and you talked about the need to have conversation with women and other Black men and other women and other people in general about the challenges that many brothers find themselves going through to just get through day to day. And I told you that as long as I have a platform and an opportunity to service the community, it would always be on the forefront of my heart to have that conversation with you. And you told me about this group of men that you are in communication with and in relationship and support with. And I told you, let's bring all the brothers on. Let's talk. And I mentioned us bringing in my friend Bashe Williams, who's a licensed clinical therapist in the area that you all happen to be in, because I kind of thought, it would be important to just have some clinician support on how to address these issues, or just to be able to get some therapeutic framework around how we, as the people who love and are in kinship and relationship with you, how we support you through these challenges. So that's why we're here. And we are here to do this work because it's important, because it's necessary, and because far too often men don't have these kinds of conversations where they can be seen. And so I thank you, brothers, and say ashe to you for even being willing to put yourselves in a space where you're being this vulnerable to kind of talk through some of these issues. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Jason, Chris, Aaron, and Mark. Let's talk. So how did this I want to know, because I don't know the backstory of how this brotherhood came together, but tell me a little bit about how this friendship and this brotherhood came together, and anybody can feel free to jump in.
I'll start. Um, it started first with Chris and I having a mutual friend when I was doing discussions around mental health, and I wanted to take a different approach this time. I wanted to use professional athletes without talking about their status as being a professional athlete. We are still men, regardless of what we do in the workplace. And Chris and I met, the first time we met, we were able to be very vulnerable with each other. So that bond clicked immediately. Just knowing Chris, AG came about, because Chris and AG are friends, been friends for many years. I reached out to AG, it was like, wow, we knew each other for years, So that was the mesh right there. Jay and I actually went to school together. He actually knows my school nickname that I won't share it right now. And we had the same, look at Chris looking like, what's your name?
Come on, man. You gotta let the people know.
So, but Jay and I have a mutual friend who knew that Jay was talking regards to mental health and linked us together. So that bond became even stronger as well, the same commonalities. And that's how the whole brotherhood really formed around these three Black men all having the same commonality, the same passion, the same zeal regarding saving the health of Black men. And that's how we all meshed.
I love that. I love that. And that people even connected you guys because there was that zeal or because there was that passion around mental health. I love that. So, what do brothers who are struggling with mental health, what do they talk about when they are amongst themselves? Because there's so much, I think there's so much stigma around how these conversations shape up, right? And how they play out on a day-to-day. What does a normal conversation look like, or a conversation around the mental health of Black men? What does that look like when you guys get together?
I would say it's the vulnerability. We discuss the trauma that could have potentially caused the mental illness, right? So for me, the abandonment of my father, then I find out that, brother, AG dealt with similar, abandonment issues or losing, loved ones. So you then begin to understand that you are not alone. And that's important. And that's the reason why these conversations are so paramount, because once you feel as if you're not alone, you know that you have someone that you can reach out to. So that's, for me, that's how, the conversations kind of go. And you just realize that commonality, as Mark, mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Jay, you
I
suffered
think
hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. You've suffered a lot of loss in your life. Um, do you from an early childhood on through life, do you feel as if that helps to shape some of the challenge, or set the framework in which helps you to struggle? I think you've been very vulnerable about some of those losses and some of those challenges. And I think that in our community and in our friendship circles, I think we don't know what to say. If that is not your similar experience, or if that is not your walk in life, I think oftentimes we don't know what to say. And so what makes people feel alone is the silence.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, losing my mother, my best friend at the age of 20, that was a loss. Grandparents, they are the backbone of our family. They teach us the importance of the last name and how we're supposed to, walk tall. When you lose those individuals, yes, it causes a void. And then depending on when it happens, you may be at a point in your life where you need that guidance. And then being a Black man, like you said, it was difficult to be vulnerable because you had to paint a picture, a facade of something that you was not. Something, you're suppressing all of these feelings, and it then directly impacts your mental health, because you're not releasing the pain. So yes, it does relate to it directly for me.
Aaron?
um and just to go just the original question, I think when these conversations start between Black men, I think we get to a point where we're tired. I think we probably suppress a lot of it to where we think we can handle it on our own, but then it'll start to trickle into other relationships, other communications, just other things in general. And so then it's like, okay, I got to talk about it. I got to get it out. Who can I go to? And like you said, it's very important for that person to not be silent, because the reason we're reaching out in the first place is because we're having a weak moment. You know what I mean? Or we're not even a weak moment. It's we're releasing some of the things that we think are weak, that we can't always express on our own.
I agree with that. Yesterday, I had a weak moment, and I reached out to actually AG and Chris, and they knew immediately what to say, how to kind of bring me back in. I'm comfortable with that, And I think when I was talking to Chris, he could probably hear the tremors in my voice, because that's how low I was going, and I was okay with that, because I knew he wasn't going to judge me. So when I was done with him, AG knew, you know, like, yo, like what's going on? But yeah, you know, like I said, yesterday, something triggered me that I saw. And I picked up the phone. I think Chris was the first person that I called. Picked up the phone, but he could hear the tremor in my voice. He knew that there was something wrong. And we talked about it, and we talked about it. And he, you know, kind of walked me through, hey, you know, don't worry about this, you know, do this, you know, just breathe and relax. You know, after that, I got on the phone with AG, you know, kind of telling him the same scenario, and just to share those thoughts. And it was okay because I knew that they weren't going to judge me, you know, and I was kind of like at peace. So when I got off the phone with both of those brothers, I knew Jay was at work, so it was a little bit difficult. So, but when I got off the phone, it was like a woosah moment, you know, like I'm okay, you know, I'm back to the norm. But just having that where I can just pick up the phone or we can just text each other, and sometimes with a text we know when something's wrong, you know, and they will tell you, forget that text. I need to hear your voice just to make sure that you're okay. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm old school. You know, I'm in that 50 age. You know, I don't want to. You know, I need to talk to you just to make sure that you are okay. And they'll tell you we can text, but I still need to just hear that voice because you never know what somebody's going on.
Can I say this? And I'm not being judgy at all. I'm really saying this from a place of I didn't know this. Women pick up the phone and have these conversations all the time, right? We call our girlfriends. Somebody stepped on our toe at work. You know, we pick up the phone and tell you, girl, you know what this happened did. You know, like we do that. And so what you're expressing seems very normal to me. But all of you are saying this as if this is a real struggle for you. So is this a male thing? Is this a Black man thing that it's just not in a space of comfort to articulate how you're feeling, what you're going through? Because I would expect that if my voice was tremoring, most definitely I pick up the phone, I call my girls, and I know who are my 3 girls I need to call if I'm in that space. But I guess I'm trying to understand why that doesn't feel natural, or why this relationship, or why that doesn't just come to men. I guess is my question.
Never had it.
But because we're so used to not having that person to be there. You know what I mean? We're so used to dealing with things on our own. That's just a male model. Like we're our pride is like so strong to where we don't feel the need to even like, oh man, I don't think he gonna feel me like I think he will. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think he'll understand.
Who informs that?
That just come from just seeing it like throughout life. Like, you know what I mean? Like our grandfathers, like grandfathers, you know, my uncles, being around those people, man, like, man, I don't need nobody to tell me what to do and who to talk to. I could deal it on my own. You know what I mean? Like in the Black community, that's what I saw when I was growing up. Okay. You know?
So and think about this. When a young boy is growing up and he cries, what's the first thing we tell a boy?
Stop crying.
Wipe your tears.
You know, stop all that crying.
Stop all that crying. So that's already instilled in us as little boys. And we bring that into manhood. You know, I can't be weak, you know? So that's why we keep everything to ourselves.
Now for me,
stop all that. What you crying for?
I've also ran into individuals, their lack of understanding will tell you it's not their place to understand what I'm going through, right? So imagine someone that, you know, you confide in, tell you something like that, you hear, it's like, then who can I talk to? You know, if individuals are not willing to just, you know, sometimes listen, then at that point you say to yourself, I have no one I can talk to.
You know, I think what's troubling me, because yes, we do. Listen, as a mother, I've said that to my son, you know, and I don't think that's something that I thought to say. I think that is something that is ingrained in me, that it is it's unnatural sometimes to see um, men crying, right? I don't do that anymore, but yeah, and only because I have invested in my understanding, I have invested in the belief that men deserve the same level of support and encouragement and sometimes chiding and love that women need, and we are not taught that many times as Black women. Just recently, I wonder whether or not you guys saw this. It was on social media. There was a Black woman. Her son was having an outburst, and she was talking about how of all her children, she has several children, but of all her children, her son is kind of like the most emotional, and sometimes that the only way she can get him to calm down is to kind of like do breathing and demonstrations of just like acts of just like really, and she modeled this through a video, and like almost instantly he began to calm. And, we see now, people talk about the effects of yoga, the effects of all of these mental and mind exercises that help us to develop our emotional ability to be able to process, right? And I think when I read these things and I see these things about mindfulness, I think, this is stuff that I hear as an adult. I never heard these things as a child. And are we not given the tools? Like, do we see people who are not emotionally stable carrying on about the day? And those are our parents and our grandparents and our aunts and our uncles. And they inform our initial understanding of what it's like to not be able to process and deal. When we talk about violence in community, when we talk about stress inside the community, when we talk about how we deal with stuff, is this because we were never taught the right or the proper framework to be able to process our emotions? I want to bring our therapist into the conversation because I think it's important. Bashe, give me a little bit of what you're hearing here. Cause I mean, the fellas are, they are kind of uncovering some stuff for me.
Mhm. What I'm hearing is some of the experiences that I had before becoming a therapist, even while being a therapist. And everybody's right. The language that we're given growing up as boys is if you cry, don't cry like that's what girls do. So I don't ever want to show up to be like or look like a girl. Like anytime I'm showing any type of weakness, it's not okay. So we always got to have that armor up that, and we can't show any kinks in the armor because that means somebody could take advantage of us, right? Don't show them your weakness. Some of us don't even like our own voices when it's trembling, as you said. So why would I share that with somebody else? So what I do is, and something I had to do is get comfortable with what I was feeling as opposed to avoiding it because I used to have outbursts, right? I used to be the angry kid. I was sometimes isolated by myself and I didn't know what to do with it. So I turned to writing and music and stuff like that. And that was my release. And, when I work with songwriters and artists and all those different things, that's essentially their journals. If we listen to songs like DMX and stuff like that, we can relate to their music because we can relate to their experience, but they're sharing what they're going through. And then that's our connection. We just listen to the song, but then we turn the song off and then we don't deal with it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happens. We don't, and it's, you guys created a safe space, which often we don't have. Like, and like you said, sometimes women, when they want a man to be emotionally invested, emotionally in touch, but then when we give that to you, you don't know what to do with it because neither side is being trained or given permission to be vulnerable, to access those emotions.
Well, we expect the vulnerability to look a certain way. We're taught that the vulnerability has to look in a certain way in order for it to be right.
Mm-hmm.
I think uh, my husband and I talk a lot now, right? We had to go to therapy to learn how to talk to each other after being in a relationship for maybe 12, 13, 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was because it was a therapist that taught us how we triggered one another and, things that we said to each other that would set the other one off, yeah, we knew they were triggers, but we were well, at this point of the conversation, I'm trying to win. And the therapist was the first person who taught me, but yeah, but who teaches you that winning is the way to have relationship? That's not what you want. It's not that you want to win. You want to be in relationship. So if you want to be in relationship, then what you really want to be is heard and understood. And in order to be in a successful relationship, you need to be heard and then understood. And that was kind of like a light bulb moment for us, because I had always seen it modeled where the person who wins or says the meanest thing is, the person who prevails. And that was new framework that I hadn't ever had before. So I smile when you all say this about, trying to have conversations with women, because I understand why there is that reluctance, I would say, to share with in partnership or with family, with friends, because of how we are set up, you know. I don't want to go here I don't want to go here, but I think it's necessary to say I don't really think that all of this is us. I think a lot of this framework, this not understanding each other, this violence, this holding things in, I think these are kind of like vestiges of slavery. Like, I think we need to relearn one another, what it takes to make one another happy, what it takes to make one another feel supported. I don't think this is the way we communicated before we got to this space. I think this was forced upon us. And because we were forced into a situation where we were not treated well, we just learned ways to coping mechanisms. And to me, where we are in society now, that no longer works, and we've got to learn something different.
I agree.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. It's different too. And I don't like to put too much pressure on systemic racism and all that, but you think about the spaces that we come up in, we come to survive. And so in that survival, it's a known fact that the person who gets the most flack or stress from the other person is normally the person that's closer to you. You know what I mean? So if we talk in relationships, if I'm going through something and I'm shutting down, the person that gets affected the most is the person that is probably my significant other. She receives that the heavier load on it because no, I'm not communicating. Yes, I'm angry. No, I don't know how to assess what's going on within me. And a lot of that is comes from family trauma. We've all seen terrible relationships.
Yeah.
We've all seen, you know what I'm saying, in it, and it's crazy how you see it and then it manifests inside of you.
Yeah.
And it ends up, and it may even look different, but I think there is a strong barrier between, black men and black women that we have to figure out how to break, because we need y'all. You know what I mean? In my healing process, um, I'm married. I wouldn't have been able to accept the love that I needed from her if I didn't heal from what I had been through. But I also know that if I didn't heal, I would have ruined her. And so it became important for me to heal myself and be able to accept this new form of love that I've never received before, that I needed in order to make me whole.
Mm.
That's real, brother. That's real. I can go on a limb and say, man, that's communication was probably like one of the parts where my marriage struggled in. I wasn't as so much a speaker like that, to being able to talk and being able to do that. I'm always a pleaser. I'm always a person that's willing to do things, but communication was one of the things that I definitely lacked in. And that's one of the reasons I believe that my marriage, failed. Um, you so much for a person, and but if you don't have that communication, that is the number one thing that either makes or break your relationship, literally. Like, I truly believe in that. And so if you don't have a common ground, a common understanding of what's, draw the line in between, like, there is nothing that you can do. So I truly believe that's one of the number one things. Like as far as man, like we tend to struggle there.
Yeah.
I agree, but also I didn't see it in my house either. Yeah, it started in my household. I
You
didn't.
see love in the house?
I saw love, but I didn't see or understand what communication was.
Mhm.
You know, we went from dinner, then years later, everybody kind of gets in where they fit in. You know, we took that whole neighborhood out of it. You know, where everybody was just doing their own thing, so the communication stopped. And what do? You model what you see. You know, if I'm not seeing my mother and father communicate, I'm gonna be the same way.
Um,
In my last relationship, sis, I shared with you, you know, you saw her, you saw how happy I was. But during the time she shared with me, she didn't want to emasculate me, so she didn't ask a lot of questions. So by not asking the questions, I didn't open up. But I can't put that on her, right? I could have opened up, I could have shared more, but I didn't. And I always sit back and I say, was that it, right? Because if she would have known, maybe she would have had a better understanding. But then as a man, I'm feeling like I kind of respected the fact that she didn't want to emasculate me because I was going through a rough time. She wasn't sure if she was going to push me over the edge or not.
mhm.
So that lack of communication was definitely, you know, a cause of, you know, possibly the ending of that relationship.
Um, let me ask, because you guys asked me, Jay, you specifically asked me to kind of take a few questions from women to kind of understand, you know, and get their perspective on some of the things that they experience in relationship or in friendship and kinship with Black men. One of the things that came out instantly when I started posing these questions to women was the lack of accountability of brothers that they've been in relationship with, um, the lack of trust that is felt by Black women because they feel as if they can never get to the truth of any particular matter, and the conversation around cheating came up almost instantly. And um I kind of want your Mark, don't laugh because I kind
No,
of want
no, I'm
your
saying
thoughts.
that because these are conversations that we hear all the time. But I'm going to be real, and I tell women this that I date. At some point, they got to have accountability for themselves. You can't continue to throw that back on the Black man because it takes two. You know, and I tell women that from the beginning. Don't throw that nonsense back on me. You got your stuff like I got my stuff. You know, so we need to come together and figure it out. If not, step. So when women say that, I be like, no, because no, I go right into a defense mode because that's always an easy
I hear
target
defense.
for a
I hear
woman to say.
defense. I
Yeah,
hear
because
defense.
that to me is nonsense. Women have been saying that nonsense for years.
Okay,
You know
so
what I'm saying?
let me ask this question. Is it nonsense that many Black women feel as if they have to share men inside of their relationship? Does that feel like nonsense to you? I will also say that accountability does belong in the seat of many Black women, that they don't want to be accountable for their behavior and the way that they show up in a relationship too, that does not model support, that does not model trust, that does not model effective communication. But I was told to ask these questions. So I don't want you to be defensive with me, but I
No,
do want to
I
get
said my
to the
soapbox. I'm done with that.
no, no,
Somebody
no,
else
no.
can speak.
It's not about it's not a soapbox. I honestly want, because it was a trigger for you. I could tell that was a trigger for you. And I want to get to the heart of what these triggers are, because I think this, you're not alone in this instance. I think that many women feel is if they cannot be in relationship with brothers, right? I had this conversation right before I came here, because so many of them don't want to be honest. They don't want to be truthful about where they are in terms of relationship, in terms of finances, in terms of willingness to commit. So I feel as if I have to not be the bearer of bad news, but I have to bring this to you because I'd be lying to you if I said I have not heard this my entire life. I've not heard this. I've not seen this modeled. I'd be lying to you. I'm the child of a Black man who struggled to commit, who struggled to communicate, who struggled to be accountable for the feelings and the things that he kept inside. And yes, he had a rough childhood. And yes, he went to Vietnam and fought for this country. And yes, he came back and was treated like shit. And yes, he went into the workforce and was then dehumanized. All of these things I did not find out until after he died. And so I'm saying to you that it's not healthy for us to keep burying Black men before we get to the root of what's happening inside their hearts, inside their minds, inside their spirits. Because, like I said, I found this information out from a Black book that was my father's therapist book. At 25 years, I just found this book within the last year and a half. And I know that my father's situation, while sensitive and while personal to me, is not unique. So I want to be able to have this conversation and really get, not because I'm not afraid of triggering you, because you can also trigger me. And I want us to be here and be honest with one another because I want us to heal us, because if Black people don't choose each other in family, in community, and in love, then we perish. So we have to find out how to figure this out. And that's all I'm here for. That's all I'm here for.
Well, I will say this, right? When I heard that, the terms accountability, no, I don't get revved up, but I agree to this stance. AG mentioned something. He stated, if I didn't take the time to heal, he would have destroyed his wife, right? I think that's the accountability that I feel is looked for. Whereas we understand, but we're taking the steps to try to work it out, to try to figure it out. When we continue to suppress, that's when we make the decisions that put our queens in situations where they need to make a decision. So that's what I hear from that, right? The infidelity portion of it happens on both ends. So I think that's an individual. I mean, some could have sex addictions where it's a mental thing, but I think that's a decision and a choice that an individual makes. And that's not something that I feel needs to be discussed in the realms of, mental health. Now, if there's a lack of love somewhere, I think that's where Mark came in and was like, okay, now, are you looking in the mirror and taking accountability to what you're doing, the steps that you're taking as well? Mm-hmm. So again, in order for, the equation, the formula has to be right. We have to come together. So that's how I look at it. That's the accountability that I saw that I needed to take. And when I took those steps, and therapy is one of those steps.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna be honest, like I said before, I probably said before, like I'm recently divorced. There is no way, form, shape, or possibility that I'm ready to be in another relationship right now. I just can't do it. Like there's things. I've been married for 9 years, going on 9 years. There's no way I can be able to support another woman right now, or to be in a space of a woman 24/7, because I'm mentally and physically, like, I've vested so much time into the woman that I was just married to that I still need to get over with. You know what I'm saying? There's that. I think that's the part a lot of females don't get from us, and they don't hear that from us, of the understanding, like, we need to take time. You know what I mean? It takes time for us to heal, and it takes time for us to understand those valuable things that we've invested in someone else to be able to put that in somewhere else. It's not feasible. It's not what's the word that I'm trying to say? It's not doable, to be honest.
I do think
Like
that
I
I do think that women think that men walk out of relationships without the scars, the baggage, and the feelings that you're talking about. I think women think that you men can walk away without those feelings and just move on much different and much quicker than so many women feel. And I have heard that. I know I've heard that most of my life as well. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that. But because I don't know, maybe it's because in relationship people are not able to communicate that's what's left on the floor. You know, I will never forget, and I say this and then we got to go to a quick break. When my mother divorced my father, not long before my father died, they had a conversation. My parents divorced when I was 1. So I never remember them in marriage together. It was always on Thursday night or Friday after school. My dad would pick me up and I stayed there until it was time to go back to school on Monday. So I spent equal amounts of time with both of them. And they talked about their divorce in front of me. And my mother said, my father didn't show up for the divorce proceedings. And my mother said, I thought because you didn't show up, it meant you really didn't care. I wouldn't have gone through with the divorce if you had just shown up. And my father looked at her and said, and I thought that if I didn't show up, you wouldn't do it. And it was like a light bulb for me that here their marriage had been over now almost 18, 19 years. My father is, approaching his deathbed. And this was the first time that they've had this conversation. And I thought, wow, the relationship that could have been fostered, the difference that my life could have been, had they just said this to one another prior to her walking in that divorce court. And I know that situation is not unique. We don't talk to each other. We don't tell each other our truths, whatever they are. And it is forcing us into spaces where our families and our communities are being broken apart. And that riddles me. That riddles me because everybody needs support, not just women, so do men. We need emotional support, we need physical and financial support. And so when we come back, I want to figure out ways in which we can start to break that open and maybe get to that space because I think there's some meat. There's some meat there. I'm Sylvia Alston. This is Next Nation. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
I'm Noah.
And I'm Ava.
And you're listening to our mom,
Sylvia K. Austin, on Next Nation, the podcast. Yes.
We are back. So in the break, I don't know, shit gets a little crazy in the break, but we're back. Gentlemen. So Mark, I want to invite Bashay into this conversation because we need a therapist perspective. But Mark, you wanted to go back to before the break. We were talking about a lot of stuff. You wanted to make clarification or a few points.
No, I'm not making a clarification. What I said stands, but I'm talking about my son's mother, who is a psychiatrist. Okay. Our relationship right now is 100% solid. And it has nothing to do with her being a psychiatrist. I think we grown. When we dated, we were young. Neither one of us knew which direction we were going into. Then top of that with getting married. You know what I'm saying? Then you put having a kid on that. We don't know what we're doing. We're just trying to figure it out, and we have these real conversations. One of the questions he said, did you marry me because of Josh? And I said, no, I really married you because the sex was good, But I can have those conversations.
We took a laugh.
Now. I couldn't have said it back then. But because our relationship, we are solid. Like if she's dating somebody, I can meet them. If I'm dating somebody, she can meet them. And we play off that. But right now we are best of friends. Like before we did this, she was talking trash to AG on the phone. Like, yo, I'm his therapist. You know, y'all can't do this and this to him. But back then, it wasn't like that. We were
Wait,
young.
she is a psychiatrist, but she's not your psychiatrist.
She can't be. But the reason why she can't be is one, it's a conflict of interest. But I am open and honest, and I tell her stuff. But when I hear her crying, I say, well, how the hell are you gonna help me in your crying? You're supposed to be the quote unquote professional. But she is my ride or die girl that I can talk to, you know, when I am going through something. That if I'm dating somebody, I'm like, I don't know why this chick is acting like this. And she'll give me, well, what are you doing? Have you done this? You know? And that's what I needed. I wasn't getting that before. I can always go to my boys, and most of the time my boys are always going to agree with me because that's what men do, you know? We are just going to agree. Now, some of us will check us, which is good. But at a young age, none of my boys were checking me. Now they do. But her and our relationship is solid. So if I was going to get married again, which I'm not, she would be the person I would marry.
Again,
but it's not happening. We are good where we're at. You know what I'm saying? We are good. You know, we raised a great young man. You know, he does what he does. He's successful. You know, we've done what we've done as parents. But when you have a kid at a young age and nobody's known what's going on, and we didn't have parents who can really model that.
there was so much there. Bashe, I'm going to switch to you.
I will say this about, you know, the therapeutic relationship with your ex-wife, her being a psychiatrist, like you said, the conflict of interest, but the emotional side too. Like sometimes we got to remember, like me I'm a therapist, but I'm a Black man before that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so if another Black man is coming to me and talking about his traumas, and he wants to get emotional and it triggers something to me, I'm going to create that space where he can be emotional and I can show him that I can be emotional with him and we're going to be all right.
Right. Amen.
Because I have these emotions too. And some of the things, a lot of things when Black men come into my session and talk about their experiences, it takes me back to my experiences. Mm-hmm. And so we already have this connection and relation where like, and sometimes we don't even have to say anything. We just give a head nod, like, you know what I'm talking about. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we got to process that together because, like you said, sometimes we got the boys who just egg us on or won't say nothing. I don't want that space inside my session. Like if they don't have that anywhere else, they're going to have it in a session with me. And I'm okay with that. Like I give them permission to leave that stuff with me for the moment, for the week. And then they come back, we can process it again. Whatever you need, brother, in this space is what you're going to get. And as you say, you guys have created this relationship, this bond with each other, where you trust each other. You can hold each other. Like somebody that I trust, they can hold me accountable.
Right.
You know, when you talk about the relationships with women, when they talk about men cheat, I saw a meme and I directly related to it where a woman was saying that I didn't cheat, but the man was talking about how verbally abusive she was, how neglectful she was, how she talked about him, talked to him, did these certain things, but she stood on that I didn't cheat and you did. But meanwhile, you're beating them up and you're doing all this other stuff. So it is a dual responsibility in those relationships. Mm-hmm. And sometimes us men don't know how to walk away from relationships because that seems like a failure. Or so what we'll do is we'll do something to make them break up with us.
Can I add something else to that point? Mm-hmm. In many instances, when Black men are in relationship with a Black woman who's verbally abusive, oftentimes that models the behavior that they recognize from their relationship with their mother. Mm-hmm. And they think that it is the norm. And because it feels normal, because it's familiar, they will hold on to it. And I think we've done a disservice in our community about holding Black women accountable for how they speak and how they parent and how they communicate and how they talk to Black men. I think we've done a terrible job at that. And it normally it'll rear its head when I see conversations around Mother's Day and Father's Day. We talk about Black motherhood as if it is some sainthood, you know, that can never ever be challenged, can never ever be ridiculed, can never ever be discussed in a real way. But whenever we talk about Black fatherhood, we go immediately to the paint on how horrible, Black men have been in this, that, and the other. And that we will never, and I have had Black women tell me, I can never tell my mother, that she did this or that she said this or that she did. I've had women and men tell me that. And I think it's unnatural because this sainthood that we hold for Black women to not hold them accountable for how they show up is also a part of what is ending many of our relationships. And I think it needs to be challenged, checked, and discussed.
And I'll say just really quick, then I'll let brothers get back to it. It's one part of it is that something we saw from our mothers, maybe. Another thing is we also have this machismo about us of saying it's not that bad. Like all she's doing is saying, so I can block those words out. We're not that great with our words a lot of times. So what another person says doesn't really affect us. We think we don't. And it's not as bad as what's happening outside the world, outside of my house, right? Even though home is supposed to be that safe space, it's not as bad. And then that's what we get, the emotional mistress. So that's when we find somebody we can talk to, right? Literally, I have couples who've been married for 15, 20 years, and they have some of the conversations you said that they should have had the first date. But some of them, one might have a person on the side who's literally sustaining their relationship, their marriage, and they don't even realize it. Because as much as you argue in the home, I have a little bit of safety when I come back up. But I don't want to be with that person. But there's a soft space to land, and then I come home and I can deal with my wife. Or I come home, I can deal with my husband, because I got the soft space outside of that. Literally, they don't understand that side piece, that person on the side is literally sustaining their relationship. That's what happened with COVID. Once we couldn't have access to those people who had this, now you got to be with your partner in the house with them all full.
I just say the hell with this shit.
Force you to really deal with what's going on.
Right.
Force you to really deal with what's going on.
Yes. Oh, that was, wait a minute. I got to throw my little pinky up there because that was, I know a lot of people in those situations. I do. I know a lot of people in those situations. And you're right. Once they couldn't see Bay on the side or Boo on the side, they had to really take a look in the mirror and deal with themselves and the relationships that they were in. And many of them decided, I don't want to do this anymore. This too much, as we say. Yeah, I really think, Bashay, I think you uncovered some stuff. You uncovered some stuff there. And there was one other point that I wanted to make, and I want to make sure that I say this the right way. I think another thing that makes many Black men beholden to that mother image and that mother figure, even when it's a mother who was not a good mother, is if the mother didn't leave them. They, in many instances, if the mother stayed, regardless of whether or not it was a bad childhood, your mother was verbally or physically abusive, but she stayed, she didn't leave you, they look at that differently than they look at a father who left or a man who left. They can hold on to mommy differently than they can hold on to the father who left and not understand. I saw a meme recently that said, that talked about, the longer I'm with my wife, I would now understand why my father left me. I saw that very recently, like within the last couple of days, and I chuckled at it. But there's some truth in some of these jokes that we push out. We don't deal with the arrest to our development. Some of us don't even realize that some of our mental health challenges are because that pain or that trauma or that experience of someone leaving us or someone abandoning us or someone hurting us, it puts us, we stay in that space. We don't really get past it. So we may grow in physicality, but emotionally and mentally, we are still that 7-year-old. We are still that 12-year-old. We are still that 15-year-old. And when we don't deal with that, it erodes and it causes so many areas in our life to just completely come apart.
Sis, you just touched something, right? Because I never remember my parents to be married as well. my father in and out of prison, out of my life. But at the age of 14, my mother, she was in a same-sex relationship, decided to move in with a lover, right? Like left me to kind of fend for self, with my grandparents. Again, at that point, was I not good enough, right? So that feeling of abandonment, right? But that was towards my mother as well. So it was a point where I was feeling that from both of my parents. Then I lose my mother at an early age. Like I said, still my best friend, but then I lost her. So yes, like that love, that loss, but then my father swoops in and comes in and plays the role of a father. Like he stepped up after, decades of not being able because of his own struggles. So like you said, the stuff that you learned about your father, I learned about my father, and I'm realizing that it's generational. Now, do I want to have a child and continue this? Like, is it a cycle?
You won't continue it, Jay. I'm not a therapist. Um, but sometimes we have to let ourselves and our parents off the hook that they did what they could do with the information and the experiences that they had at that particular point. I have, you know, I've shared this with you before. I was molested when I was 7 years old. And not until I found my father's book last year did it finally hit me that because I was molested at my dad's house by my stepbrother. And for the life of me, as much as I have hero worship of my father, I am also angry at him that he couldn't see what was happening to me. But finding that book let me realize that the person that I saw every weekend was such a broken spirit. There was so much that my father never shared with me that I never knew until I read what was inside that book. There's a part of my father I never knew, and he was in my life, my entire life. But there's a part of him I never knew until I read what was in that book. And so I would just say to you that there are so many things that we hide from one another. We hide them even from ourselves. I don't know whether or not your mother was really in love with the woman or the lover that she moved in with, or whether that was just a way to mask the pain or whatever else that she was going through. But I will tell you that you're deciding or not deciding or to deciding, and of course, I think you should have children. I think you'd be a great father. You don't need to whatever you missed. I know you're going to give back the love that was missed. And I don't want you to hold yourself or hide yourself from love or life because you're afraid of repeating someone else's mistake.
I appreciate that, but to Chris's point, I'm taking my time right now.
I'm not mad about you taking your time. I'm just saying I don't want you to pay forward somebody else's mistake. Aaron, you wanted to talk?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all deal with a little bit of the same, realm of things. I think it looks different for all of us, but I can, as far as the abandonment, I didn't realize, I felt abandoned until my father was murdered, and that caused resentment towards him. And my father was my hero, even though I only had one real year with him. As far as physical, he was locked up. The majority piece is something you definitely and you got to dig deep. You know what I mean? Like you said, we can't always blame them for what they knew or what they did, but we got to kind of heal and grow through it. But on the other hand, too, there are some things that our parents do that we got to hold them accountable for. And I think that accountability will play a part in how we move forward, because a lot of stuff that we normalize isn't normal. You know what I mean? And we have to start breaking those stigmas of, okay, yeah, this is normal, because it's not, and it shouldn't be, and it manifests itself as we grow older, and then you kind of looking at stuff like, what am I doing? But this is so normal to me, it's like I can't change.
We do normalize a lot of stuff that is not normal. You know, I think even how we discipline children, how we've learned to discipline children, you know, that over the last few years, and having my daughter, I realized, you know, my son and I had a conversation. He's like, you parent Ava so much different than I do. And I said, that's because I'm older and more informed and more resourced and more well-read. And, you know, I share with him and apologize to him as often as I possibly can that, son, when I had you at 20, you know, 27 years old, your father and I were not in a good space. We were not the people that we've grown to become. That took a lot of prayer, took a lot of therapy. And so did you see things and did you experience things that probably came out of both of our anger and pain? Most definitely. And our incorrect teaching of what discipline should look like, you know. And have I been a better person to you along the last few years that I've learned and understood and become, you know, more well-resourced or more well-read? But you're right, we carry forward things that, you know, cultural norms, societal norms. I think religion informs a lot of how we show up. And if those things don't work, it's like, you know, when we talk about mental health, we tell people to pray your way through it. And, you know, that doesn't work, you know. And so many Black folks, and I not a couple years ago, a pastor committed suicide, a well-known pastor committed suicide, and people were talking about, you know, why would he do this, and why would he bankrupt the church, and why would he, and all of these things about religion that we tell each other, just, you know, pray it away, call Jesus and move on. And that stuff doesn't work. And people who are in pastoral care and pastoring, you know, people, they also are struggling and cannot tell you that they are having these struggles, or that, or even make it normal that not being okay is okay. We got a whole lot of work to do in a whole lot of ways. We've learned a lot of things the wrong way. And, you know, that is what some of this conversation is about. And I think the need for this brotherhood, you know, I hope there are so many different people who listen to this conversation and find their safe spaces and, you know, their brothers who can help them power through, or just say, I'm not okay, and it's okay for me to not be okay.
That's it. We are pleading for our brothers to, let's start talking, right? Like Mark said, reach out to that person. You know,
But you know, I'm gonna be real. Some people I don't have the energy for.
Well, you have your safe space or group to talk, you know, to talk to. You don't have to be real or share with everybody, because everybody's not entitled to your honesty, you know, or entitled to your story. No, I agree with you.
Yeah, like here I'm 50 years old, and now I feel like I'm in a safe space. You know, it took me until I became 51.
Oh, no.
I had space. You know, it is, you know, so that's why it's important for young brothers, you know, even younger than AG and Chris, to really understand, you know, talk to somebody. You know, there are people out there who is willing to listen, you know, but it's that vulnerability piece. You know, we still have a problem with it. You know, I'm okay with it now. You know, I don't care how you think about me. You know, most people who talk about you are, oh, you're going to therapy, what's wrong with you? Generally, those are the people who need therapy themselves.
I think we all need therapy for something. We all getting over something.
And I want to say this real quick, Mark. You said something that's very important, right? You talk about us being more vulnerable, being able to share that, but we also, like you said, we got to create boundaries. We don't have to share everything with everybody, and not everybody is our responsibility either. Like you said, protecting your energy, you don't have to be available for everybody that comes to you. That was one of my biggest things. Like, I was going to be the people's therapist. I was going to go back to the hood and help everybody, but it was exhausting. I didn't have time for my son. because I was trying to help everybody else. So I had to dead that and say, you know what? This is my responsibility. I have my phone. It cuts off at 8 o'clock. I'm with my family. Even if I'm out of town, it's still at 8 o'clock because I need my time, and creating those boundaries along with being available for others. It's so important. And I want to applaud Christopher and Jason talking about y'all not ready for what y'all not ready for. And that's totally fine. Like I
Yeah.
said, sometimes we jump into situations because we feel like we have to, or the pressure of society or whatever tells us to, and it causes us to be even more damaging to ourselves. And then the other people experience our damage. It's just a cycle that we sometimes force ourselves to be in.
Listen, in this pandemic, I want y'all to talk about this because it sounds like this brotherhood existed in some regards before the pandemic. But through this pandemic, you guys have been able to kind of like really turn this into what this is in front of us today. How much of this pandemic, because I think we are in this work to your dead culture, like, stay on Zooms all damn night, stay in meetings, just because we're home, keep going, keep working. And I think that also can add to the bankrupting or the exhaustion that we're talking about of our emotional pool, that takes away from our being able to just do our daily stuff, the stuff that we have to do, which is show up for ourselves, show up for our children, show up for our partners, the people we're in relationship with, and show up in our professional spaces. I think it's very important for us to talk about not only creating safe space to share, but also creating safe space boundaries, like you mentioned, Bashe, to just be able to, replenish, because if you're constantly pulling away from yourself and everything that you see out in the world is taking away from you, then what's left, So how are you brothers? We're kind of getting to the end of our time together, but how are you brothers able in this time to not only just talk to one another, but how are you replenishing your spirit? How are you taking care of your mind and your mental health?
And I could start on that. The pandemic was hard in the beginning. It actually, I digressed a little bit in my mental health first, and then I had to lean on my supports to catch me back up, and then eventually I was able to get on top of the pandemic as far as like becoming mentally stronger, doing the work. But it gave me the time to realize that the work that I had been doing, I needed to try something different to exceed that work. I think I was plateaued in my healing process,
Mm-hmm.
and in my mental health. And so it was time for me to, number one, be more vulnerable, which allowed me to grow, and get uncomfortable again, and telling people the different things that I dealt with. And then it allowed me to, I'm a social worker, so it allowed me to assist more people in the same healing process that I was dealing with. And I recognized that it wasn't just me dealing with it. It was literally everybody that I worked with.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. The pandemic for me was rough, man. I was going through so many changes. My divorce was hit, so I had to learn how to cope with that. It was dark times. I had dark times, so I had to talk to my therapist. Really focus in on who Christopher is again, on what makes me happy, what draws my attention, what keeps me stable and keeps me going. That was one of the roughest times of my life, man. The pandemic was, and also dealing with football. I had all those things as well, and then as being a father, those things are not easy. Going through that whole process,
Are you a
but
coach?
I had to,
Are you a coach?
no, I actually play football.
Mm.
So,
You gotta
like,
tell the folks that.
hmm?
Gotta tell the folks that.
Like literally, like being in the NFL is a
Yeah.
different state. Like it's not easy on us. A lot of traveling, a lot of family problems that goes on through life, and it really showed me who I am again. Now being able to talk to people, being able to deal with what I deal with now. Starting the podcast has helped me out tremendously. Being able to voice the things that I've been through, being able to things I've done, and writing has helped tremendously as well. I found a new love for writing. Like I write in a journal like every single day, no matter how I'm feeling, how bad I'm feeling, how good I'm feeling. I'm writing in that journal, letting myself know on this date of June 23rd, like how is Christopher feeling, what I did today, what made me happy, and then having my safe space with my brothers, man, with AG, and having my space with Mark, man, being able to talk to those guys, Jay, man. That's I think that's one of the important things that has drawn me and kept me whole and kept me sane.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
You know, for me, I had to be proactive and not reactive, right? Got furloughed. I knew that it was about to be the end. Like, that's what I saw immediately. My PTSD kicked in. I'm thinking about homelessness again. Everything kicked in immediately. But then my sister shared two things with me. Brother, you need to protect your peace. And you need to prioritize you, right? And then I just added a little to that. Prioritize you for a better you. And I started this movement. Every day I was just talking or doing my walks and recording, these feelings. Like Chris saying, instead of doing daily mood logs, writing them, I was recording them. So that was helping me through. And then, the protect your peace thing just blossomed to heights that I was not ready for, right? I was unprepared because so many people were hitting me on the side, telling me that my story was helping them. So then I just took it as, well, this is my purpose, right? So I just found the way to get through it was to get in the middle of it and then continue to share. Like, my transparency was going to be someone else's transformation. So I figured if I continue to live my purpose-driven life, it will help me get through it. Even during my dark days, I continue to try to help even when I'm in pain. So under prioritize you, it's, protect your peace, reboot, reclaim, right? These are practices that, I speak to, Chris, yeah, I'm writing a book about all of this myself, to share it, because I was challenged by my aunt, to share my story, my testimony. So this has helped me.
And one of the other things too, Jay, that I want to, celebrate you for is that you also returned to school.
That
You took the pandemic to go back and finish your education, and I think that should be applauded as well, because that's a big undertaking that many of us think that we don't have the time or we're too old to do, and you took that on, and I think that you definitely helped a lot of people with that.
Well, thank you, but it helped me as well because I was busy all the time, right? Like, it didn't allow my mind to wander. I was always focused on something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that I'm sure that was helpful. I'm sure that was helpful.
Really.
Fellas, listen, we're out of time. We're out of time, and I really want to, number one, thank you all for being honest, for talking through some of the things that you've experienced. I do think that we're just scratching the surface, so I'm going to tell you that when I start to get feedback from the folks, I'm probably going to ask you guys to come back at some point, because I think this at minimum could be a quarterly discussion about how we improve, how we stay healthy when life starts throwing challenges at us. And as you guys do better and get more people involved, I want to make sure that we give you all a platform and a space to just continue to share. So Chris, give us the name of your podcast.
Well, it's actually me and my brother AG podcast. It's called Brotherhood the Unveiling.
Let's get it.
Let's get it.
Let's get it.
Let's get it.
Brotherhood, the unveiling. Now, are you talking about some of these issues on your podcast? I hope so.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah. Yes.
Woo.
Absolutely.
Career, all of it. All of it.
Woo.
Literally.
Everything. I encourage y'all to go listen. I cried on it 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes.
did.
It was deep.
Yes.
We vulnerable. We don't care about backlash.
None of that.
One thing that I love about it is that we've agreed to be as vulnerable as possible, to encourage people to continue to try to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? Because it's a tough thing, but once you're in a space where you can be, it's like another form of therapy.
I agree. I agree.
One of the things that I want to end with is that two of these brothers, Chris and Aaron, their kids will not let them be in this video alone. And I think this is also, just another testament that we don't get an opportunity to see as often as we should, Black men being in relationship with their children. And I know that if these babies been bothering y'all all hour, that means you're involved, you are loved, and they need your attention and they need your support, and we're gonna let them have you. Hey,
no, they're always in the mix. They're always. That's what I like about it. Yeah. That's what I like about it. You see Creed is smiling. He always in the mix.
Every single time.
Always. And I think it's important for them coming up to just see their fathers being who we may not have grown up and had. My dad was a gangster, you know what I mean? So to be able to do this in front of my children, it'll allow them to be able to be vulnerable and be truthful and learn themselves early on.
Right, and I want to echo that. My son always says to me, I'm glad you're doing this discussion on mental health because now I understand who you are. He said, for so long, so many kids grow up not even knowing who their parents are, So this has really genuinely brought us closer, so he's now vulnerable, but the bond now is even deeper. So, kids go off and they do their own things, but I make him watch it, and I don't even make him watch it. He dives right into it himself now. He's looking forward to it. Let me see what you're talking about. And you're like, yo, Dad, I'm dealing with this. I'm glad you talked about it. I mean, so it's a good thing. I mean, too bad years ago nobody was doing this, but the thing is we're doing it now. Saving one life day at a time, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, listen, for me, this is very personal. And Mark, like you said, I grew up in a situation where a Black man did not believe that he could share or be vulnerable with who he, truly was at his core. And unfortunately, society and that need to want to share, it forced his demons forward in a way that destroyed him, and so for me, it's very personal to be able to have these conversations because Black men are legacy, our families are legacy, and without y'all, we can't make it, and so we've got to be able to figure this out and power through and find our way through it. So, it's important to me to be able to support you guys and give you an opportunity to share and have this platform whenever we can make it happen. So, I will commit myself to that. And again, I want to offer y'all a ashe. Thank y'all so much for being here and being to do this. Bashe, I'm gonna give you the final 30 seconds to just power us on out. If you want to give us an exercise of healing or however you see fit to just give us some leadership on the way out. I'm emotional now. I really don't even I don't want to talk too much more because I know I'll break down. Like this was really important to me, and it's really emotional for me.
I think, I guess the appropriate way to close this thing is to really remember this conversation. Remember how important it is. Remember how valuable it is. Remember how valuable you are when you're going through this space. And whatever you needed from this moment is you got it, right? And you can take whatever you got from this moment and move it forward. And one of the things that I kind of came up with this slogan when I was really struggling, it was you either commit to your breakthrough or you submit to your breakdown. So in your moment, ask yourself, what do you need? and give yourself permission to give it to yourself.
Commit to your breakthrough or submit to your breakdown. I love y'all. Wow. Y'all got me for life. We family now. So just get ready.
Absolutely.
Get them shades together though. Go get them balances or else I'm gonna be, taking
Goes back to that relationship question.
I'm gonna be delivering balances. Black men need balances. They need curtain rods.
Sylvia, I got a question. Well, I got everybody. The question that you were talking about, women asking like, why don't men do this and this and this and this? I can't remember your word. Here it is. You had Chris and Jay talk about this is why we don't commit. You know what I'm saying? They're being honest. How do women respond to that? You have Black men who are I can't commit to you. And they're still talking about men aren't giving us X, Y, Z. But here you go. You have two Black men who say, hey, I'm not ready for that. But yet we still get that question.
I actually don't know how to respond to that.
Well, put it this way, throw it out there to them women and tell them I want to answer.
and then the next time, I don't want to play therapist. I want to be a brother. And I want to tell you about experiences when I told somebody I wasn't ready.
But you understand what I'm saying?
Do that now. Do that now. Shit, y'all got 5 more minutes.
No, I mean,
but you understand what I'm saying though, right?
Yeah.
Of course I understand what
here we go. Yeah.
Can I say this as a woman? Something that I do know. I do know that most women believe that their love, their sex, or their cooking is going to be whatever it is, whatever their is, or their beauty or whatever. They believe that that's going to be the thing that changes you. That makes you come. Don't shake your head at me. I'm telling you that most women believe that. Most women believe that. But I will say that men have fostered that insanity. They have fostered that, by telling women that they're in control with
part of the game. It's part of the game.
But what I'm saying to you is whether or not it's a game, I believe that it's been fostered by men. So it may be insane to believe that I can do this, or my superheroism, is going to be the thing that changes him. But I can tell you that that's been fostered by men. But I will say that when I learned that in order to be in a successful relationship with my husband, that it was going to have to be when he was ready to be a husband, everything changed. And I will say that I had decided that I was at a space in my life where if he decided to be a husband, great. If he decided not to be a husband, that I was okay with being alone. And I don't believe that many women get to this space. They will sacrifice loneliness and solitude just to say that they are in something, because we are taught that we all need partnership, or we all need a partner to fulfill some other area of our life, that we're not complete unless we have ... That when I got to a space that I was comfortable with myself, even if it meant that I was going to be alone, that's when partnership really began in my relationship. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that we arrived at those points in syncopation, and it turned out to be a blessing. But I can also say that we arrived at those points not by our own will, but because my husband decided to submit to therapy for himself, and then invited me in. And when he invited me in and asked me to come to therapy with him, that was when the design of our relationship completely changed.
But that's a brother who's ready. He was ready.
And that was the accountability that I was talking about.
That's the accountability. That's the accountability.
This is what I need to do for me in order for me to be the best me. He prioritized himself at that point. And then the family, came after. That's why you didn't go to the first session, right? He had to go on his own.
No, he went for a couple of months And then the therapist said, I can't get to the next step without bringing her in. And that was because at first I said to him, I don't want anything to do with your therapy. You crazy. I'm not. That's how I played that. And when I got to therapy, that was when I learned that my language and how I spoke and things that I said, how they triggered, some of the behaviors that he was offering. I learned more about me. I did. I learned more about me. I learned that I loved him, but the way in which I was showing him the love wasn't the way that he needed. And we had to relearn, how to love each other in a way that was edifying for each of us, because neither one of us, we could say we love each other and we could do things to show love, but if we didn't love each other in the way in which the other partner needed, that it was kind of all for naught. So you've got to also have a partner who's willing to do that work with you, willing to get down in that dirt with you. And I think too often we tie ourselves to people who are just not ready for whatever reason to do that work. Thank you for listening. We shall see you soon.